Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are now live. Welcome back to a conversation with Floyd Marshall Jr. It's been a while, and today I am joined by returning guest, one of my absolute favorite guests, the Angel Super Crucial. I absolutely love having her on the show, and I think this is your fourth or fifth time.
Wow, I don't know. It's been quite a few.
Yeah, you know what? I think you have been on the show more than anyone else. So we're going to have to get like Saturday Night Live and get some
Wow.
jackets or get something.
Well, it's been so nice to be able to chronicle things with you over the
Mhm.
past few years.
Yes,
So yeah, it's lovely to be back and so great to talk to you.
yes,
Floyd.
absolutely. And it's always good to see a beautiful and friendly face. And under the current circumstances, it is more so important to talk to people that you know and that you love. So it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. And today we are going to be talking about the hit movie Heist 88, starring the incomparable Courtney B. Vance, that you scored. And I listened to the soundtrack, and it's a really nice soundtrack, and I just love the feeling of suspense with certain songs, and the
Yeah.
feeling of oh man, something's about to happen. So can you talk about how you actually landed the job to score Heist 88?
Sure. So I have been working with director Manaj Huda for many years. This is our fifth project together. So when he got hired to direct this film, he called me and said, "Listen, I've just made a deal to direct a film that I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing together." And I was like, "Great!" And so he started describing it to me. Um, a film that is loosely based on a real, like one of the biggest bank heists in U.S. history that happened in 1988 in Chicago. And he's like, we can you can do some really really cool stuff with this. So that's how it came to me. Most of my gigs come to me. It's people, either I've worked with them before or they have discovered me in some way out there in the ether. They've heard something of mine and been like, "Oh, her, yeah, she does that interesting stuff," or "She does something cool," or something along those lines. So that's how it came to be. And then we made my composer deal with Paramount. This is a Showtime original film, and it's on Paramount Plus. It was released at the end of last year, before the strikes ended, which was a little unfortunate because then Courtney and none of the cast were able to actually promote it. So that was a bit of a drag. But despite that, it it was released worldwide and it did very well. So that's a good thing. But it's just kind of a drag when you can't celebrate your own work. You know what I mean? Just the feeling of like, hey, And the thing is that also it's a Bassett Vance production. So this is his production company with his wife Angela Bassett. So they are executive producers on the film as well, which is really nice. So that's how it came to be. How I work on it is a whole other ballgame, and I could get into the description.
Please, because that was actually my next question.
Okay.
What was the process like working on this film?
So with all projects, the first thing that happens is a discussion with the person or the persons who hire me. And so in this case, with director Manaj Huda, we talked about what he was hoping to achieve. And the interesting thing is, in the story of Heist 88, Dwayne Johnson Cochran, who is the writer and producer, he had actually covered the story. He's from Chicago. He covered the actual bank heist when it happened in 88. So he decided, though, and he'd always wanted to make a movie about it because he was just like, he just felt that it was the kind of thing that could really make for a great film. And he infused it with a young character who is a house music DJ and label owner. And this young character is the nephew of the criminal mastermind played by Courtney B. Vance, and he needs money. Um, the thing about the timing and the world is that this is Chicago 1988, the height of house music in Chicago. So so when I was talking with Manaj about what would you like, he's like, is there some way that you can find some 80s club music sounds, and infuse them into the score? Not that we're going to be creating anything that sounds like club music, but that it would be, just there were certain sounds that were just really, really popular at that time. So I was able to do that, which was fun. And so often when I work with him, we do that. We try to keep the score very organic to the world and authentic to the world of the characters. And so that was a big part of what we needed to do. And then, of course, this is not a shoot 'em up. This is not a film in which, there's kidnapping and all kinds of craziness going on. It's more about the internal workings of the mind of our criminal mastermind. So there's this constant, like, three-dimensional chess going on in his head, and we're in his head a lot of the time. So it was important for me to create themes that could represent that a lot of things going on at once, very dense kind of pieces where I've got lots of ticking, blipping things happening against the sweeping kind of thematic score. And, in terms of how, the styling of Courtney's character, Jeremy, he's a little bit old school, even for the time. And so it felt natural to me to infuse something that, again, that was a bit sweeping, these sweeping kind of pads and strings across these very electronic sounds that were what Manaj was hoping for. So that's, I think I've said it somewhere, and I've been quoted of saying, like, I felt like there's this sort of three-dimensional chess being played, and I'm like one of the pieces on that board, matching his moves, matching all of these kind of moves with my sonic, contribution to the film.
Yeah. The music was very interesting because, like you said, you could denote house music within the music, because it kind of reminded me of, and you know what, I didn't know it until you said it. It reminded me of 80s films, the way the music
Wow.
was playing. And you know what, I didn't even realize it until you said it,
Wow.
because I said, oh, that's different. And
Yeah.
it was funky, and it had a little edge to it.
Oh yeah. Because there's not a lot of, like, on-screen drama,
Mhm.
right? Because a lot of, again, it's all about the planning, the the spying, the lying, all of the kind of, things that he had to do to get a bunch of non-criminals to go in on this with him, which is actually what the real life person who pulled this off was able to do, which is just unreal. So, sometimes, yes, I needed to kind of, a lot of the score is intense, and it's very purposefully there to create the intensity that, it's not like there's not explosions. There's no, again, there's no shoot 'em up. So it's not, you need to kind of feel it, like this bubbling kind of, like, ooh, what's going to happen, and so that was what a lot of the score had to do. And then at the same time, there's like a montage sequence toward the end, when they're all preparing to kind of go off to do the heist. And so it's a kind of an emotional scene, but it's also a montage. So there's a little bit of dialogue, but it needed a piece that was maybe going to be source, maybe going to be a licensed piece of music. And in the end, they said, no, we want you to score that. And I'm like, okay, great. So I made sure to do something 4 on the floor for that, which again, that ties it into the house music sound of vibe of that time. But it's not a piece of source. It's score, and it's hitting action, and it's building and turning and following all of the craziness that ensues as they're pulling this thing off. So it's kind of fun. But
Yeah.
I could play you a little
Yeah,
snippet.
could you play something for the audience, and could you describe what what this scene is, as far as what this music is, the music that you're about to play, what
Yeah.
this scene actually is. So when they see the movie, they're like, oh yeah, this is what she was talking about.
Yeah, I could do that. I'll play a little something that I started the album with, and I'll tell you like
Okay.
the difference between the album and how it plays out in the film.
Okay.
So this is a piece of score from Act 7 of a 9-act film. And it's an intense moment in which they're in the thrust of pulling off the heist, and we're cutting from character to character, and they have to make these phone calls. This is a time before pagers, before cell phones, before the full computerization of the banking system. So when you wanted to make a money transfer of some sort, it required like a special code that the client was given, and they had to call into the bank, and then they had to check that particular code against what the bank could see. And so, that's how this would go down. And so our young characters who have been pulled into this heist are all they're all role playing at this point. Some of them are inside the bank answering the phones and having to okay these transfers, and the others are outside the bank having to call in and say, hey, this is so and so, and pretend to be somebody that they're not. And so in this particular scene, we're cutting into from the bank to one of our characters whose name is Rick, and his phone's not working, and he's like, oh my god, he knows it's time, he's got to be able to take that call, and he's running around the house with you're looking to plug his phone into a jack somewhere so he can get that call in. And so there's a lot going on there, a lot of like running around and like paranoia and trying to make it happen. So I'll give you a little bit of this. I maybe won't play you the whole thing, but I'll play you a chunk of it, and so you can get the sense of what it does. But it's fun, and you can let me know if the volume's okay. So there's a lot of building and a lot of, dynamic things going on that I need to hit when I'm creating the score. And I'm working to pictures, so I'm not just writing a piece of music that is divorced from what the film is doing. I'm actually, catching all of those moments of action and diving for for that phone socket, and cutting back to what they're doing in the bank, and they're like worried because someone might catch them doing the wrong thing and overhearing them, all kinds of stuff. So that's what's going on there.
So when it first started off, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is how I was picturing this.
Yeah.
When it first started out, it's when they're making the phone calls.
It's the beginning of it. It's like the prep and the setup, and like getting, I think Danny has to get another coworker. He's
Mhm.
working in the bank, and he's got to get another coworker like away from his desk so he can take that call. So there's all this sort of preamble, and so this is this ticking clock in the score because that's what's going on. It's like, oh, can we make this happen? And so it's and then it's building until the point at which it's like, is Rick going to be able to answer that call? Because if he doesn't, that could like tank the whole thing. So
And you could kind of, I could picture when it started, I could picture him when that particular portion of the music started, when it started picking up, I can picture him running around,
yeah, he's,
looking
he's like looking at the
for,
phone. He's like, what the hell? You can't, that kind of stuff.
excuse me. So let me ask you this. When you are doing a score and you have, oh boy, excuse me.
Not at all.
Wow. When you have a scene like that,
Yep.
how do you write it? I would guess, if that's the correct way to ask that question.
Okay.
How would you write that particular scene? Can you explain that process?
Of how I actually write the music.
Yeah, how you would write the music for that particular scene. Are you watching the film on the screen as you're
Yes.
sitting at a keyboard? How does
Yeah.
that process work?
It's synchronized. So I am programming music through the keyboard. All the different sounds that I've created, a palette of sounds that I've put together. Like I was talking about before, some of it's organic, like big strings, plus all these huge pads and all of these individual little kind of unusual sounds that I'm mixing and blending to create the whole overall sound. And then I'm literally sketching in and playing in to picture. As I'm watching it, I'm playing and building it up rhythmically, melodically, and then working on the dynamics of it, how big to get, how small to get. At the end, it goes back down pretty small, but it's still ticking at that level. It's just like there's still that intensity going on for quite a while. So, that's the process. Not every composer works what we call working to picture, which is doing it this way. I'm all about working to picture. I don't create a whole body of work and music and just see if it works later and then give it to a music editor to cut it in. Some people do. It's a legit way to do it, but I don't. To me, it's a completely different skill set from writing songs, for instance, which I have a ton of songs out there, a lot of records out there. That's a whole different process. But for this, I'm very reliant on how it's been shot, how it's been edited, what the actors are doing, how they're moving, how, there's a little micro expression I can catch, a little detail, there's a close-up of something, a hand on a phone or whatever it might be in this particular film. Or, we're looking at the ledgers when we're in the bank, when the bank actually finally realizes that that something crazy has happened and money has left the bank and where it shouldn't have. And we got a close-up of a hand on the ledgers, and all we're hearing her say is, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit." Those moments are the things that, I can enhance, do something on, sprinkle it with a little something. Sometimes it's a sound, sometimes it's melodic. It's not always melodic, but a lot of my score in this is quite sweeping and thematic, and melodic, as well as being intense and kind of atmospheric.
Do you consider your music dialogue?
Do I? Actually, that's an really interesting question. In a way, it is, and this is, this is a good second question to the one you just asked, because I write and record under dialogue, right? Because I know where the score is going to be sitting. Not all score is going to be sitting on top. Not every scene is a montage sequence in which it needs to be led by score. A lot of times it's underscore, which means it's sitting under dialogue and it still has to do its job. And I am very, very aware of what is going on in the dialogue, and I will sculpt and write underneath lines of dialogue. And sometimes I will even rhythmically put things against dialogue, almost as if it's like a lyric, like somebody's singing something. I did that specifically in Boiler Room, where there's a scene with Ben Affleck um, and who is he talking to? I think it's Vin Diesel and also, gosh, oh my God, I'm like blanking. But it's like the whole gang, all of the key cast are in this scene. It's a really fun scene, and they're talking about Wolf of Wall Street. Not Wolf of Wall Street. They're talking about, oh my goodness, I am just completely the. It's been a heavy week when I can't
Yes.
let me tell you, and it has. So we'll just acknowledge that. But it's a fantastic scene in which the dialogue is very, there's a rhythm to it.
Mhm.
And so the cue that I wrote to that scene is it almost feels like somebody is almost rhyming over it, it's got that feeling about it. So yes, can the music be a bit like dialogue? For sure. And certainly it functions as dialogue when there is no dialogue in a scene. It's certainly informing us what to feel about it, in case we don't fully get it. And sometimes, I'm playing against what you're seeing. That happens occasionally where, a director will want me to play against a comedic moment and do it very dramatic, or vice versa, lighten up something that seems very dramatic that you're looking at. So lots of ways in which score can, really be its own thing.
So with you scoring major motion pictures, you've also scored short films. You were instrumental in Yvette Vargas's film.
Yes.
Can you explain the importance of scoring a film correctly?
I think it's vital. If the score is not sitting properly within that film, it just takes you straight out. And I've experienced seeing that at times, even on big projects, where sometimes you're just like, odd choice, and I won't specifically mention anything in particular, but you'll be watching something and as an audience member, even if you're not in the industry and you're not listening to it the same way that I would listen to it, you will feel like something's off, or something just won't play as convincingly. You could really ruin somebody's performance by putting the wrong piece of music in there. And that applies not just to score, but also to the source music that is chosen tonally for a project. So it has a huge effect on how you feel when you're watching, whatever it might be, an episode of television or a film. If the score in particular, though, is not right, is not of the world of the characters and of the world that they inhabit, we're going to feel that. We're going to know that something's off, even if we can't put our finger on what it is. I can put my finger on it because, again, I'm listening for that stuff. But, but generally, yeah, you can tell.
Yeah, because sometimes I've watched films and I'll say, now, why did they do that?
Mm-hmm.
And why did they do it there?
Yeah.
Because you were immersed in the scene, and then they'll do something and it takes you totally out.
Yeah.
And the moment is gone.
Yeah.
So why do you think that happens?
Not everybody is as good at being able to figure out what music to use and how to use it best. It's really subjective. When it comes to Manaj Huda, he comes from being a DJ as well. Back in the day, he was playing all this house music. Of course, this is a very specific one of many, many projects that he's done and that we have done together. And they're not all the same, but it's like, but he has a good feel for what to use against picture. Ava DuVernay really knows how to use music. She knows how to work with source music and with score. And I've had the pleasure of course, working with her on a CBS pilot that she directed for them. It's another skill that, like, not every filmmaker knows what to do with music. And sometimes they will rely on maybe a music supervisor to help guide them through that process, but some of them don't really want any outside input, in which case maybe they're not fully getting, maybe they're not able to visualize the right kind of thing, that, or the best thing. I wouldn't say the right thing, because many things can be right, but maybe not the most impactful thing, or the most appropriate thing for tone. See, I mean, tone is a huge part of filmmaking, and that's something that I think, if it's the wrong type of music, it can really kill the tone of a project. I've had filmmakers say to me, wow, I worked with somebody once, and they gave me something for these dramatic scenes, and it was making it play like comedy. And I'm like, I get it. Yeah, that's a big problem. Or it's too dark, it's too heavy for like something that's just like a small character study where nothing dramatic is going on. So tone is huge. When I took over scoring Hawthorne, I was told that they never really nailed the tone. The Snuffy, who had been the original composer, had not really nailed the tone of the show. And so it was my job to make sure that I did, and I did.
Mhm. So you've mentioned this word a few times, source music. So can you explain the difference between source and the actual score? Because I know some people will watch this in the future and they'll be thinking, well, I thought it was just music. So can you explain the difference between the two?
Sure. Yeah, source music is a term we use for anything, any piece of pre-existing music that is licensed by the production to put specifically into the film, but it is not music that is made for the film. It's music, it could be anything. So it could be, a hit from yesteryear that it needs to be playing on the radio. Source music is something that is organic to something that's going on in that scene, usually, but it can also refer to things where, let's say, the filmmaker just wants a huge song to carry a particular segment of the film, like a nice big montage sequence or something. That's also considered source. So anything that isn't score is source, and it's sourced from outside the film and outside the filmmaking process.
So the source music that was used in Heist, was that something that was decided upon by you and the director, or was it solely left up to you as to when and where to use source music and a particular type of source music? Who made that decision?
Oh, that's the director. I'm never that person. The music supervisor has a say in that, or at least it's their job to source tracks and then present them to the director and say, hey, here's some things I thought might, after, of course, like I do, they have a discussion with the director and find out what they're hoping to achieve. And what they might want to be hearing in their film. And so that music supervisor will go look for things in that vein. And then, of course, budget is a big part of that discussion, because just because you want the Rolling Stones track in your movie doesn't mean you're going to be able to afford it. So, there's a lot of things that you have to consider. And so, so that's really outside of my area. However, because I know music in the same way that Manhaj does, he would talk to me about, like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And everything that he picked and talked about using was cool. And then it turned out that we actually worked with an in-house music supervisor from Paramount, who then also helped Manhaj find the tracks and find out if we could actually afford them. And so we really only have like five licensed tracks, I think, or maybe 6 in the film. Maybe only 5, actually. Well, that I'm talking about. So the ones I'm thinking of are all, sort of sounds of the club world that we all, will have known from yesteryear. So things like What People Do for Money, which is just a classic, and and it works so perfectly in this film. Love Come Down, just a lot of really cool, fun things. So but those are not really, they're not in my realm. Those are decided by the director and And then, and in terms of even where they happen in the film,
Mhm.
that's determined by the director. Of course, some things are obvious, like when the DJ is playing something, that vinyl's got to be something legitimately of the era, and that's where that comes into play. So yeah, there were just those things are not part of my job, but I tend to work with people who want to are interested in my opinion anyway. So we'll talk about it, but it's not my call, right?
So, follow-up question to source music. How do they right the ship if the source music is wrong? Or is there any way to right that ship?
Sure. There are a million options, literally. There's so many options that can work in a scene. More than you'd imagine that can work. But again, it's like who's making the decision, and if they are, and I've heard this a lot in projects, not projects I've worked on, but other projects where, a filmmaker's got a favorite track and they don't really care that it doesn't work in their film. They're going to get it in there, and they're determined to hear it in their movie because they love the band or they love the artist, whatever, and they just want it in there. And it's like, it's kind of sad because it's just not it's not a smart move for the project. It's a different kind of a thing. It's coming from a place of love for that track. I get it. But you always have to think about what is serving picture, what is serving your project. And even if you thought it was going to serve your project, once you've shot it and edited it, maybe it no longer really does fit the mold, So, it's, there's always a way to believe me, that things get changed at the last minute all the time. There's usually like several options for every piece of source music, because even up until that moment of the final mix, people are still maybe second guessing something. I've been on dub stages on my projects where a piece of source music's been in for like months, and all of a sudden somebody on the dub stage like sneezes or coughs during a scene, and everyone's like, don't forget, you're right at the end of everything. So the tension is higher than other parts of, like, earlier on, people are like, yeah, they're cool about things. But when they know that like these are like my last moments to make a decision, it tends to kind of change the way everybody reacts. And so just that distraction of like somebody coughing or sneezing or something in a scene can cause everyone to go, what's the matter? Did you have a problem with the music? And it's like, no, no problem with the music. They're just sneezing or coughing, but sometimes it will open up a thing of like, yeah, do we really like that piece? And then all of a sudden something that was not even a discussion turns into like, what else have we got? And then the music editor will have on board like, X amount of options. And so something that was looking like it was destined to be in that project, in that film or TV show, might just get booted at the very last minute, simply because all of a sudden everyone's like hyper focusing on something, for no good reason. Sometimes it just happens, we're all humans. These things happen.
Yeah. So with Heist 88, did Angela and Courtney actually get to review it before it was released to make sure that, okay, everything is exactly the way we wanted it? And if not, do you then go back to the drawing board? Let's say, for instance, you did put a piece of music in it, or they didn't really like the way that particular piece of score for that scene worked. Did they have the power to say, you know what, can we take that out and change it with something else? Or do you get to a point of no return where you say, we just have to live with that?
No, up until we've actually finished that final mix, there are always things that can happen in this. And in the most of the times, I say like 99.9% of the projects I work on, when I'm hired by a director or a producer, let's say a showrunner in television, most of the rest of the producers leave us alone in that process. If if that producer or director that I'm working with is not happy with what I'm doing, there could be discussion amongst them, like, what should we tell her to do? That's never happened. I could just tell you right now. It does happen to composers, and sometimes, they're in a situation where it's a free for all and everybody wants to have an opinion about everything. But I tend to work with people who are like very protective of their vision. It's not about me. It's not them protecting me. It's protecting their vision as the director. It's their baby. And so they don't really want anyone interfering with that if possible. Ava does not want anybody in the mix with her composers. Manaj also prefers it that way. All of the other projects I've worked on with Carlos Avila, on various projects as well, there's really like no interference. Now, that's not to say that other people don't listen. So once Manaj and I have gone through, let's say, like I did the first 3 acts, but I don't really work consecutively. I start in the middle somewhere. I start with like a big cue somewhere where I can really get into like writing a big piece and see how that's working and is it doing the job and all the interesting sounds I can get into it. And I'll work all over the place. So then it was a late in the day that we actually went from just he and I, me sharing with him, and he's like, no, I don't want you sharing it with anybody else. I'll let you know when I'm ready to share it with everyone. And that's, again, not unusual. So we got to a point where he was like, great, send the first, 4 acts to our post supervisor, and then he'll share it with everybody else. And in most cases, and I've heard this from a lot of other producers, even producers that had nothing to do with this particular show, with this film, they'll say, we don't really want to interfere with, the showrunner. If they're happy, we're happy. If the director's happy, we're happy, that kind of thing. So it's, but again, it can be, it really depends on the dynamic of who's on board and how much they want their voices to be heard in that particular project. So it can be complicated, but thank goodness it's been very straightforward with me. I rarely have to go back in and redo things. There's a very odd occasion where maybe I thought, like, there was something in Kidulthood, which is a big British classic at this point. First film I did with Manaj, and there was a scene in which Amel Amin, who this was like his very first time playing a lead character in a film. Now, of course, you will know him because he just played MLK in Rustin. He's really, his career has just blossomed, and I'm so happy for him because he's a wonderful actor and a beautiful person. So in this scene, he's actually got one of those body cameras on. And it's like he's freaking out because he's just been forced to torture somebody and he didn't want to do it. And he's like sick to his stomach about it. And he's outside in an alleyway, and it's just like, and it's slow motion and it's all kind of crazy. And I was like, oh, here's a chance for me to like really go big. And so I did this like big trippy thing. And Manaj said, I really want it to be almost silent, like, like very minimal. And so I was like, oh, no problem. So, I changed that out, and that was fine. Yeah. So sometimes, if we haven't fully discussed what to do in a particular scene, even though we do that on every project, we spot it and we go through it inch by inch. But sometimes, you just, you try something and see if how that feels to the director, and it may not, maybe the opposite of what they wanted to have. And so yeah, but very rarely am I off target, put it that way. I spend a lot of time really listening to what the creatives in those spotting sessions are hoping to hear. Even when they're like, oh, we don't really speak like, musical language. We don't really know how. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Tell me what you want to feel. And tell me what you do and don't like about the temp. Because, sometimes they're like, oh God, we don't like that instrumentation at all. Please don't use anything like that. Okay, great. Or we love the instrumentation, but, but can you angelize it? So
Okay.
that's
So
come up.
you said something really interesting. Tell me how you want to feel.
Yeah.
Do you find that a lot of film composers, and your experience being in the business for as long as you have been, do a lot of film composers ask that question?
That's a good one. I really don't know what other people's process is,
Mm,
to be honest. Um, I really don't know is the answer to that. But I mean, all composers, if they're really doing their job, they are very analytical. We are all extremely analytical. We're thinking about story on multiple levels. We're thinking about it not just from our own perspective, but also from an audience perspective, but most importantly, from our director's perspective in film and our showrunners and producers in television. It's we're really having to think about it from just a lot of different perspectives. And also, you know I also consider things like, okay, who's the network, you know
mm,
who's actually the distributor of a television show. So when it was TNT and it was Jada's show, they didn't really have shows with very kind of like hip and score that was non-traditional for the most part, not back then. And so, when I took over that show, I had to be mindful that what they had before, that the network liked, even though the show runner did not want to continue in that vein, and the producers were not really keen on what was going on musically. So I didn't want to take it like a million miles away,
mhm.
but I did need to add sophistication to it and make sure that that drama series, which did have a tiny bit of humor in it, but it was a drama series, it was a
Right.
hospital drama, that it didn't play like, literally like comedy bumpers in between scenes, or that lightweight kind of stuff that people kind of do as these sort of bumpers that are not. It just it was more the writing was more sophisticated than what was going on before. So I always have to be kind of mindful of many different things going in. And at the end of the day, though, every composer needs to think about feel, because it's how is that audience going to feel in that scene. But sometimes what we think and seems obvious to us isn't what, again, like when I say sometimes a director will want you to score against picture, like not what you're seeing. You know, it's a heavy scene. I mean, Tarantino is like the genius of recontextualizing a scene by putting in, a song maybe into a scene that is completely anachronistic to what you're looking at. He will play something that is really heavy against a comedic moment, or vice versa, and he
Mhm.
does that quite expertly. So there's so many ways of flipping it.
Yeah, he will. I've seen some films where the violence was completely over the top
Oh yeah,
and the song was so silly. So you're sitting there laughing while watching someone being dismembered. And you're
yeah.
saying to yourself, now, wait a minute.
I know.
Is
How
this
wrong is
really
this?
right? Is this really funny? Crazy Eight. You're watching Crazy Eight,
Yeah,
and Samuel L. Jackson gets the thing shot off, and they're playing this music, and you're saying, okay, this doesn't add up, but
yeah,
it fits.
yes. Again, it's about intention. It's all about the intention. Which again, when you've got a filmmaker like Tarantino, when he's writing and he's directing, he knows he's got a vision. He's got a very strong vision, whether you dig it or not. He knows what he's trying to get across, and it's effective. And yes, sometimes we're made to feel like, oh my god, I shouldn't be laughing at this, when it's, but that's what he's known for. That's what he does. Not everybody can get away with that, but yeah, but it's a great example of like how you can be incredibly creative with how you use music in your projects. It doesn't have to be the same old. And if you think outside the box, then don't be afraid to kind of explore that.
So with something like that, with a Tarantino or with anyone else that would take those types of risks, I guess I could
Yeah,
say,
it is a risk to a degree. Yeah.
would you recommend if anyone said, okay, I want to do that type of thing with my film?
Yeah.
What would be your advice as far as the type of film composer to get? Someone with some hella experience like yourself that understands the nuances of what the person is actually asking for, even if they may ask you, but in all honesty, they really don't know what they're asking for, or they just can't articulate what they're asking for, but they're asking for some Tarantino-esque type of situation.
Yeah. Um, I'd say, I mean, look at, I think it always pays to have somebody who has experience. If you're like, if you're a filmmaker early in your career and you want to try something really different, um, and if you have the luxury of being able to try something out and then it doesn't work and you can then change out who you're working with, then you can experiment with someone who isn't that familiar with how to do this job. But if you got time constraints and you need to just deliver and but you want to try something, I think, well, two things. You also want to work with someone who's open enough to do it. Sometimes, and I've heard this many times from not from filmmakers, but from filmmakers actually, who have worked with composers who are very, very experienced, and they have felt incredibly patronized by their composers,
Mhm.
like because they don't have the musical language, and so the composer, you can be a little bit bullying in cases like that, um, and that's something you want to watch out for. But I think if you want to take a risk and try something unusual, make sure you've got the right creative partner in your composer, someone who can even do that. There are some people, and I've talked to like music editors about this, that they don't think outside the box. You can tell them, oh, think outside the box. If they don't naturally have that in them, they won't be able to do it. So you don't want to put someone in a position where they want it, even if the will is there, they don't know how to think that way. So I think that's the most important thing, is like, find out, you know, are you like on the same page with somebody, and can they actually execute that thing for you? That's the important part of it.
Yeah, yeah, because you don't want to get to the end of it, and you're like, that's not what I wanted at all.
Yeah, and that can happen. We all know, like, that can happen for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what are you working on now?
So I'm working right now. I'm actually scoring a documentary called Velvet Vision, which is a documentary about a gay iconic filmmaker. Um, his name is James Bidgood, and he created a film, a sort of art house, soft porn film back in the 70s called Pink Narcissus. And it became a huge kind of underground hit. This film explores his life and the making of that film. And, he was a very difficult personality type, an incredible, incredible creative. The work that he did, the beauty of the images that he created were just off the charts. And I'm not just talking about film. He designed costumes. He handmade things that you just blow your mind. He would create his own sets. He would design them, paint them, and literally it was like a Technicolor fantasy. Like, everything was just amazing. And so it's a really exploration of him and his process and all of the. I mean, he worked with Christian Louboutin.
Mm,
He did ads. He did all kinds of things, but he did everything by hand.
mm,
And he did 90% of his work not in the computer at all. And so as things moved into the computerization of graphics and things, he found it a hard adjustment, but he was so unbelievably creative. He figured out ways of doing things you just could not imagine. He did these in a 1-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. and they look like they were shot on a massive stage somewhere. So, it was really kind of a very, very interesting. So in any event, this is, it's about him. He struggled with mental illness. He struggled with certain mental illness and also addiction. And so it makes what he was able to achieve even that much more amazing, frankly. Yeah. So that's what I'm working on currently. But I also have my passion project, which is a different documentary that I produced and scored. It is called Lives Beyond Motion. And it is, we have 33 men in contemporary dance speaking in this film about their lives and what it means to be an artist, what it means to be a man in contemporary dance. And we have legendary figures in this film, including Bill T. Jones. We have Matthew Rushing, who's the associate artistic director of the Alvin Ailey Company, Laura Lubavitch, and all of these men are choreographers and dancers. Kyle Abraham, who's wonderful and amazing, and all of our men are really quite something. It's a beautiful exploration that speaks to every artist across the arts, and that is going into festivals. We're actually kicking off our festival run in January at the Dance Camera West Festival here in Los Angeles. And I'm very excited about that because one of our men, David Rusev, who has the last word in the film, and he's talking about this is why you're on the planet and this is your bliss. So I call him our bliss man. He is being honored at the festival as well. So I feel like that's going to be a really great kickoff to this film. Many of the men know each other or have worked together, even if it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It explores a lot of the ups and downs and the tragedy that was AIDS. We go through a whole section about what the AIDS crisis did to the New York dance scene in particular. And that's something that I too have experience of and lost many a friend. And so, yeah, it's a very, it's a heartfelt and beautiful journey and ultimately uplifting film. So I'm excited about that.
Well, I'm excited to have you back on because we have a date for you to come back on to talk about that film.
Okay.
I don't know if you forgot, because I did say that I wanted to have you and a couple of the dancers on to talk about the film and to talk about their experiences. And it's interesting because basically the two films that you are working on now, I think are really going to be important going forward, especially in the climate that we find ourselves in now.
Absolutely.
Because there is a lot of suppression. There's going to be a lot, especially when it comes to the arts and certain types of art.
Yeah.
So film, books, everything, it's going to be extremely important that, people such as yourself and, other creators, film festivals, that we keep pushing the envelope, because it's getting to the point where I think we're going to be the front line in keeping the
legacy,
lines of communication open, I guess.
Oh yeah. No kidding. I mean, and not to lose the legacy of so many incredible artists out there. That's another thing about Lives Beyond Motion. It's a real legacy project. It's I mean, many of the men are like Laura Lubavitch. He just turned 80. The Guggenheim celebrated his birthday last December when he hit 80.
Wow.
And he's still going strong. I mean,
that is beautiful.
It is beautiful. It really is. So yeah. But yeah, I hear you, and that's a big concern. That really is a big deal. Absolutely, the suppression of certain types of entertainment and stories and when we've already seen what's been happening with the book banning, I mean, that's a huge deal. And yeah, that's a whole new extra concern going onto the plate of concerns that are growing by the minute.
Yeah.
Wow, you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah. But before you go, your governor did something pretty amazing with the what was it, the new tax break that he's
Yeah.
actually bringing to California. So can you talk about that a little bit before you leave us,
Me
and how
too.
exciting that is?
That's huge. I mean, thank God, because really so much production has left California because we couldn't compete with the tax credits coming from other states. This is definitely going to help inject some more activity and bring productions, I'm hoping, back to LA, and other parts of California as well. So, I think it's like 750 million, is it?
Yes, something along those
Something
lines.
like that, which is like, I think, three times the budget that they'd had before. Something significantly bigger, which is really, we needed it. We really needed it, and I'm so glad he did it. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what gives, but we definitely needed that because people are feeling kind of like, well, I can get a better deal elsewhere,
Mhm.
and and that's, and sometimes, look, at that's good for work wherever it's getting the business, it's good for them and it's good for their locals. But we shouldn't be losing productions because of that. So I'm really happy that he did. Yeah, that he did what he did.
So where can people find you if they're interested in uploading or downloading your albums, because you have quite a few phenomenal music? Where can people find you, and where can people find your music?
They can find my music on all of the streamers. I would say, jump onto Spotify. If you listen to music on Spotify, and you look up Heist 88, you will find the album there. You will find the correct The Angel there, because there could be others. People have taken my name, and it's just so annoying. I mean, in a million years, as a creative, the last thing I would ever want to do is use someone else's name. I don't even like using titles that other people have used for pieces of music. It's like, how do you distinguish yourself out there in the marketplace? It's kind of ridiculous to not consider that, right? But in any event, this is where it's at. So, but yeah, please, by all means, it's on Spotify, on Apple Music, on iTunes, Amazon, all of them, Deezer, all of the other, gazillion places that people consume music these days. I, Paramount Plus just put their own playlist together of all of the score plus those 5 pieces of source music that we talked about earlier, which is kind of fun, so that you're getting some of the flavor, that 80s flavor, in between some of the score, which is cool as well. So you can find me at theangelsoundclash.com. That's my website. And from there, you can find all the links to everything. In fact, right on the front page of my website, there is what we call a landing page for Heist 88. So you click on that, and it'll show you every service, and you can click on the service that you want to listen to, and that'll make it very easy. And then, you can, while you're there, you can have a look around, a listen around, and see some of the other things that I've done. I mean, between the Angel material, which is how I, the name that I use, not only as a composer, but it came from me being a recording artist and record producer. I also did a project called 60 Channels, and that also has a lot of really cool stuff going on. So you can check that out too.
Yeah, the music is phenomenal, ladies and gentlemen. Take it from someone who's listened to it. It is absolutely amazing. Make sure you go and check it out. It is phenomenal, as is The Angel. It is always such a pleasure having you on my podcast. You are my top 1 favorite guest, and that is no shade to any of my other guests, but
No, not at all.
there's a reason she's been here 5 times, ladies and gentlemen. My wife was like, she's been there that many times. I'm like, yes, she has, because I love talking. I love talking to you. So this is always, as always, it has been an absolutely fun and amazing time. And before we go,
Yes.
any advice for anyone who would decide that this is the business for them, what would be one piece of advice you would give someone, and especially
Yeah.
to a young lady deciding that, hey, film composing is the path that I want to take? What advice would you give them upon entering the business?
It's a rough one, and I have a hard time with this because it's so hard to get in. It's so sewn up by, really like the top 20 guys, so much of it. But I would say if you want to, learn it, work with up and coming filmmakers. If your friends are making film, if films, if you're anyone that can hook you up with someone that is, doing a film, and you can actually have something that you've recorded, or even somewhere where you've tested out how you work to picture, because there's ways in doing that these days. There's so many different apps and things that you can use to kind of, practice your, the art of working to picture. Make sure that you're prepared with some kind of samples of things that you can show people, and then work within community. Find other, like, especially like if you're in college and you're working with, within a filmmaking class or something, where some people are studying producing and others are studying filmmaking, as a director, and other people are doing other things. You might want to stay close to those budding filmmakers and see if you can, build a relationship early on in someone's career, that then, once you have that dialogue, they can take you with them. It's just not an easy place to be. And the whole industry is difficult, but I will say specifically, composing, where women still represent like under 10% of all working composers. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, if you want to choose something that's difficult, follow me. But again, the bottom line is, if you're really passionate about doing it, and you've got the skills, then you owe it to yourself to find a way in. And the way I found my way in is not the way a lot of composers come up. I created a body of work that then was discovered by filmmakers. I was lucky in that respect, because I was not only releasing my own records, I was remixing other high-profile artists. And we're going way back to like the 90s again. So I was remixing The Far Side, and I did that remix for Donald Byrd, which was a beautiful piece of music, for an album called The New Groove that Blue Note put together. And that remix caught the ears of Vondi Curtis Hall when he was making Gridlocked. That is how, first they asked me to come in and do pre-records, because Tupac, Tandy Newton, and Tim Roth were a band in the film. And so they were like, oh, can you write the pre-records and record them? But I couldn't, because I was literally going to New York to promote this album. Me and a bunch of other producers, some serious heavyweights. So I couldn't not do that. They were flying us all in to make sure that we could, market and promote that film, that album, that compilation album. So, but again, because I did this remix and I had no idea that it was going to have another life, Vondi picked that track to be my remix of it for his film. So that's licensed to the film. And then I wound up also being hired to score part of the film. Polygram just would not allow them to hire me, unless, because I hadn't scored a whole film before. Mm-hmm. So, but eventually they came back and we figured it out, and Stuart Copeland and I both scored the film separately, different parts of the film separately. So that's how that worked out. But yeah, I mean, people always ask, like, how did you do it? How was your path? My path was unusual. Most composers come up under a big composer. They'll assist for years, or they'll ghostwrite, and they'll produce and hope that one day they'll be able to step out from behind that curtain. That's kind of the thing. So I would say, if you really want it, then just be fearless about it, and be intentional about who you reach out to and how you present yourself to them, and just be ready. Because man, when you're in it, it's like you can't, there's not a minute to think.
Mhm.
You have to just get in that zone and nail it quickly. So
That is absolutely amazing advice. And
it helps.
I hope that whoever is listening to this will take it and listen to it a few times so you can internalize it. But be ready, be ready, be ready.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining myself and the amazing, the angel, Super Crucial. Make sure that you listen to this podcast a couple of times. Make sure that you check out Heist 88. I'm going to check it out myself this weekend because I'm retired, so I can watch it whenever I want. But I'm going to check it out this weekend.
I'm playing
And
you on one of those. This is a very late in the film piece of score when
okay,
they get to Geneva.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing this film because I like suspenseful films that make you think. I like a thinking film where I'm sitting there saying to myself, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And score is so important to that because it draws you in.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go check out Heist 88, scored by the one and only the Angel Super Crucial. Make sure that you check her out on all of her socials. Do yourself a favor because seriously, her music is fly. It really is. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, as always, love it like a hobby, but treat it like a business. Everyone have an absolutely amazing, amazing night.
Thank you, Floyd.
Thank you.